My name is Nonat, and welcome to my first ever deep dive into an ancestry in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Similar to how I've been doing with the classes, this is going to be me going over all of the mechanical gameplay elements of the ancestries. I'm personally not fluent enough in Pathfinder lore to consider myself a good resource for lore-based information. So a lot of it would come down to me being like, yeah, dwarves are your typical dwarves. They live in mountains. They hit stuff with hammers and craft things, and they whistle while they work. It would mostly just be me sort of paraphrasing all the stuff on this page in ways that would be less informational than just what's on the page, you know? I'll just be like, dwarves are as strong as iron because they're stubborn, and also they're stubborn and wise, and they're tough. And honestly, there's sadly not enough out there, so there is room here on YouTube for people to make Pathfinder lore videos, especially for Pathfinder 2e. Maybe I'll do them someday, I just have not had the time, and this is gonna sound weird, history is not my strong suit. I don't learn well about, dates, events, and story. I can learn mechanics and gameplay and stuff like that pretty well, but I have a hard time telling stories of lore. Maybe if I had someone else to write the video for me, I could absolutely voice it, and maybe that'll happen sometime in the future. Keep an eye out. But for now, let's go into mechanically what makes a dwarf a dwarf. Also, I love this picture, by the way. This picture of the regal freaking female dwarf. Oh my word, she's amazing. Starting off, one of the big things that makes dwarves stick out as a starting ancestry is the 10 starting hit points. Obviously, as you grow in level, ancestry hit points mean less and less, but early game, 10 hit points is huge. I believe the only other ancestry that gets 10 starting hit points might be half-orcs and goblins if they take a certain feat. I don't even remember if half-orcs get it. I don't think they do. But this does sort of come back to bite them. They have this amount of hit points because they're so bulky and stocky, and that also gives them the lowest base movement speed in the Core Rulebook, which is 20 feet. Granted, this is only 5 less than some others, 10 less than elves, which we'll get to in the next one of these, but 20 feet per round can be super hindering. They do have some ways to counteract this, but we'll get to that when we get to that. They boost Constitution and Wisdom, and then anything else they want, like any race they get free boosts, and they lose Charisma. So, again, strictly speaking from a mechanical standpoint, technically, they don't make great sorcerers, but they make great fighters, barbarians, clerics, anything that needs a lot of hit points, or any wisdom-based caster. They could even make a really good druid. They could actually make an incredible melee druid. And yes, I know, with the voluntary flaw system, you can make any stat in 18, even the flaw, I know, but I'm talking from the base statistics, because if you do take a voluntary flaw, which, for those of you who aren't aware, you can take 2 -2s to give 1 + 2, so if you wanted to take a -2 to intelligence and a -2 to dexterity, you could give a +2 to your charisma. But this still makes you an overall weaker character from the overall standpoint because you have 2 less stats than everyone else. I'm not saying that's a bad or wrong way to play. You're more than welcome to do that and play a badass dwarven sorcerer. In fact, I encourage it. I'm just speaking strictly mechanically. They start off speaking common and dwarven as you'd expect, and they have the humanoid and dwarf traits. All dwarves get dark vision, which is huge. A lot of ancestries tend to have low light vision and then a way to spec into dark vision. No, if you're a dwarf, you can see in the dark, and that's fantastic. And actually, believe it or not, there is something missing from this sidebar in the Core Rulebook. If you see right up there in the corner under dwarf, all dwarves are actually supposed to begin with a clan dagger of their clan for free. And in fact, if you ever sell it or lose it, you're supposed to be affected by it as other dwarves will think less of you. If we look at the dwarven picture, we can actually see she has her clan dagger there on her belt, even though she looks like she's probably like a noble or maybe a cleric of some kind. But she still has the clan dagger. So that's something that they forgot to put in the sidebar and was added in the errata. I will be going over any changes that the errata makes to the dwarven features. Now that we're done with the stuff that all dwarves get, let's move on to some more specializations with the dwarf heritages. For those of you who aren't aware, a heritage is sort of a sub-race of your ancestry. It just more determines where you come from, how you were raised, and how that shaped you as a character. For example, the Ancient Blooded Dwarf manifests some of the resistance of the dwarven heroes of old within them and actually grants a unique reaction. If you're going to make a saving throw against a magical effect and you have not rolled yet, you can use your reaction to gain +1 to that saving throw. It's not a huge bonus, but especially early levels, just to get this for free, when you don't have many other reactions, especially if you're a spellcaster with almost no reactions, that's fantastic. Being able to get +1 against any magical saving throw, really good stuff. The Death Warden Dwarf, an offspring of a generation of Tomb Guardians and possibly even Necromancers, because of this negative aspect of your heritage, you actually have a resistance to necromancy effects, and if you ever get a success on a saving throw against a necromancy success, you get a critical save instead. This is a little situational. It's great against something like Ray of Enfeeblement, which happens to be necromancy, and I will admit that a lot of debuff spells are necromancy, but not all of them. It's a little bit but it's still not bad to have. There is really no bad heritage out there. Well, I won't say that yet. The Forged Dwarf is the first of something we're going to see a lot of between a lot of different heritages, and I call them the temperate heritages. Effectively, there's a lot of different ancestries with heritages that make you better against a certain type of temperature. For example, the Forged Dwarf gains half their level in resistance to fire damage, and they treat all heat effects as one step level lower. So if you are in extreme heat, you're only in severe heat. And if you're in like severe heat, you're only in moderate heat, or whatever the next step down is. So you can go into a lot worse off areas and be okay. The Rock Dwarf is a lot of fun, and is sort of what we think of, the first thing, at least I think of, when thinking about a dwarf. You become as solid as a rock and gain a +2 bonus to fortitude or reflex DCs against attempts to shove or trip you. This also applies to spells or effects that would try to knock you prone. So already, that's a +2 against so many saving throws. Once you are a little bit more experienced, both as a player and a GM, you realized how often things attempt to shove, trip, knock prone with a spell effect, anything like that. That is super common. So being able to just get a +2 bonus to all of those is massive. Also, if you're ever being shoved 10 feet or more, you only move half the distance. So if something were to push you 15 feet, it'll only push you 5 because everything in Pathfinder rounds down. Except for cantrip casting levels. That is the only thing that rounds up. I've been so confused by that. The Strong-Blooded Dwarf is basically super healthy and against toxins. He's a vegan and doesn't ingest toxins in his lifestyle. That joke is awful. You gain poison resistance equal to half your level, and any of your successful saves against a poison reduce its stages by 2 instead of 1. If poison comes up in your campaign, amazing. On top of that, if you critically succeed against a poison, it reduces it by 3 stages. That will just outright remove most poisons. This will even reduce virulent poisons by 2. I think the best part of this is that if you normal succeed a saving throw against a virulent poison, it reduces it by 1 stage. Normally, virulent poisons can only be reduced by a critical success. If you happen to run into poison, this is a phenomenal heritage. And moving on to the Dwarven Ancestry What's that? Yeah, I got a second. What's up? Hey guys, I just got some kind of bad news. I figured I'd share it with you. I just found out that about 57% of the people watching this video right now aren't even subscribed. 57%. Can you believe that? It means so much if they just click the little red button, you know? It would just help so much, but instead... Anyway, I'm sorry. I shouldn't let it bring the video down. I'm fine. Let's just get going. So first level ancestry feats for dwarves is Dwarven Lore. You eagerly absorb the old stories and traditions of your ancestors, your gods, and your people, studying in subjects, blah, 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 blah. You become trained in crafting, religion, and Dwarven lore. And like anything else, if you were already trained in one of these things from another source, you can pick something else as well. I mean, this isn't bad. This is 3 skills for 1 ancestry feat. That's pretty good, just pretty worth it. I bet if you took this with a high intelligence score on a rogue, you could get almost every skill I know you can get every skill by level 3, maybe even by level 2 if you were clever enough. There's nothing wrong with this feat. It doesn't help you anyway in, combat, but crafting religion and dwarven lore is pretty good. I do think there's a feat that is just flat out better than this at first level, but I'll be getting to that. Dwarven weapon familiarity is another type of ancestry feat we're going to be running into pretty much every single video like this. There are certain weapons that are deemed dwarven weapons or elven weapons, and this feat just gives you access and trained proficiency in them no matter what class you are. So this can lead to some really cool builds. I will say that for the most part, these are for flavor. If you really want to be a sorcerer with a warhammer, you can absolutely build a dwarf, pick dwarven weapon familiarity, and even though the warhammer is a martial weapon, as a sorcerer, if you take this feat, you will still be trained in it. So that's a really cool way to get around some class limitations. There are also some dwarven weapons that are specifically dwarven. In fact, that you can only use them if you are a dwarf, and this is one way to get access to them. Rock Runner, and just embrace your rock roots, even though rocks don't have roots. Any difficult terrain caused by rubble or broken up craggy ground does not affect you. You can move through it completely normally. On top of that, if you make an acrobatics check specifically to balance on narrow surfaces made of stone or earth, and you aren't flat-footed, if you succeed at that acrobatics check, you automatically crit succeed. So it's pretty good. That part's a little niche, but just being able to ignore rough terrain that's made of stone or earth, I would say that accounts for probably 50% of difficult terrain. This won't allow you to get through, tangled vines or anything like that, but a lot of the time I feel like it's gonna be uneven ground or post-earthquake destruction, and as a dwarf you can just skip on through. Stone Cunning is solid if you're already a perceptive type of character. You gain a +2 bonus to perception checks to notice unusual stonework. That sounds a little niche at first, but then it goes on to say that you get this bonus to discover traps made of stone or hidden within stone. So if there's a trap wedged between two rocks in a cave, you get your bonus to discovering that trap. So if you're exploring, heck, even in a stone building this works because it is still stone. As long as you're not in some weird wooden dungeon, this is almost always going to come into play. Now this part you do need to remind your GM of because it's going to be tough. If you aren't using the seek action while you're exploring, the GM automatically rolls a secret check for you to notice stonework. Now, because this is automatic and you're not doing it, it does effectively take a -4. You don't get your +2, and it inflicts a -2 penalty, but it's automatic, so it's really good. Unburdened Iron is really good for any heavy armored dwarf. It's honestly so good that you're kind of forced into taking it if you want to play a champion or a fighter dwarf. For those of you who aren't aware, if you're wearing heavy armor, even if you meet the strength requirements, it does inflict a speed penalty. If you meet the strength requirement, it's only a 5-foot speed penalty, but as a dwarf whose speed is already 20 feet, you don't want to be moving at 15 feet per round. Unburdened Iron ignores the reduction to your speed from any armor you wear. Technically, what this means is even if you don't have the strength requirement, the armor cannot slow you down. You'll still take some of the other penalties to skill checks and whatnot, but it won't reduce your speed. Keep that in mind, casters who take armor proficiency. Additionally, they can ignore one 5-foot penalty to their speed, whether it be from encumbrance or the Tanglefoot spell or something like that. They can reduce the penalty by 5 feet. However, they can only do this to one effect. If they happen to be encumbered and affected by Tanglefoot, they can only reduce one of those by 5 feet, not both. So overall, this is just a fantastic feat for dwarves. For dwarves? Dwarves are the only ones who can take it. That's not true. There's other ways to take... I'm rambling. Vengeful Hatred. In case you want to deal a little bit of bonus damage to very specific creatures, you pick one dwarven ancestral foe of drow, duergar, giants, or orcs, and whenever you're fighting them, you get +1 damage equal to your number of damage dice on your attack. So, again, at level 1, that'll be +1 bonus damage against them. Once you get a striking weapon, it's +2. There's a lot of stuff that does this, and the problem is that these effects don't stack. Because they're circumstance bonuses, they don't add together. What I do like about this is if you ever get critically hit, that opponent is counted as a Vengeful Hatred foe for the next 1 minute. So you get your bonus damage against anyone who critically hit you. I really like that, and it makes this feat a lot more useful. Otherwise, it would be just way too niche, unless you knew you would be fighting a ton of orcs or a ton of Duergar. Also, the GM can add any creature to this list if you come from an ancestry of dwarves who were at war with these creatures. In the APG, I wasn't going to forget the APG. You know I wasn't going to. We have some more first level feats. We have Dwarven Dotiness, which is pretty good, honestly. Normally at the end of your turn, you reduce your frightened condition by 1. With this, you reduce your frightened condition by 2 per turn. It's rare to find something that'll inflict multiple points of frightened, especially at lower levels, but when it comes to it, that's really good, because otherwise that would take 2 rounds to get rid of completely, and you get rid of all of it in 1. Solid stuff. And Eye for Treasure is the one that I was saying is basically better than the Dwarven lore skill. They both grant crafting, and while Dwarven lore grants you religion and the lore skill, Eye for Treasure grants you trained in crafting and a +1 bonus to all crafting checks made to recall knowledge, which can be really common and useful. Additionally, you get the Crafter's Appraisal skill feat, which in my opinion is nuts and kind of broken at first level. Normally in Pathfinder 2e, in order to identify an item, you need to be trained in a type of magical skill associated with that item. If the effect on a magical item is from occult magic, you need occultism to be able to identify it. If it's an arcane magic item, you need arcana. With Crafter's Appraisal, you can roll crafting to identify any type of magic item. Straight up. That's so good. There's nothing else to it, it's just good. 5th level Boulder Roll, I wish was better and isn't explained well and is not expanded in the errata. Correct me if I'm wrong about this in the comments. For 2 actions, you use the step action to step 5 feet into a space occupied by a creature of your size or smaller. That creature then has 2 choices. The first is to step 5 feet backwards, directly backwards. They can't move diagonally or side to side. It's directly backwards, even if that means off a cliff. They step backwards and whatever happens, happens when they move there. Great for positioning. The other option is where the feat gets a little questionable. They can attempt to make a fortitude saving throw against your athletics DC. If they do not critically succeed, they take damage equal to your level plus strength modifier, which at level 5 would be about 9 damage. That's just a consistent 9 damage for stepping on someone. Pretty cool, but it doesn't explain what happens if they succeed. I understand, I feel like if they fail, they move, but it's not a basic fortitude saving throw. So a crit fail doesn't mean double damage, a success doesn't mean normal damage, but it also doesn't say what happens to your step. I suppose it implies that a successful fortitude saving throw stops your step, but they still take the damage, and a critical success stops your step and doesn't take the damage. And then I guess a fail and a critical fail are the same because there's no critical failure explained here. The confusing part is on the success. If they roll a normal successful saving throw, do they still block your step and take the damage? Or do they get pushed because they did not critically succeed? It is not well explained. Also, in order to take this feat, you do need to have taken Rock Runner at first level. Dwarven Weapon Cunning, again, another type of feat we're going to see coming up a lot. The prerequisite is always your ancestry's weapon familiarity, and it just gives you the weapon crit specialization effect for that weapon. Weapons. Defy the Darkness, in my opinion, is one of the coolest dwarf feats. Using ancient dwarven methods developed to fight enemies wielding magical darkness, you've owned your dark vision and sworn not to use such magic yourself. You gain greater dark vision at level 5, which means you can see clearly even through magical darkness, so long as its level is not above yours. So if someone cast a 4th level darkness spell, you could see clearly through it, but if they upcast it to 6th level and you're level 5, you can't see through it. However, this comes with a penalty of sorts in that you cannot use any items or cast any spells or any ability whatsoever if it has the darkness trait. So it's a really powerful feat that limits you, and I love that. I wish there were more feats like that. That was a really good bonus, but came with a penalty. I love that. I love this feat. I almost guarantee I would take it on a dwarf. Dwarven Reinforcement is really fun and can be useful if you happen to have a shield. By spending 1 hour working on an item, which, at least me as a GM, if you didn't have any daily preparations to make, I would allow you to do that during your daily preparations while, casters are preparing spells and alchemist is preparing stuff. I would allow this during daily preparations, and you can give it a +1 bonus to its hardness for 24 hours. If you're a master in crafting, it's +2. If you're legendary, it's +3. You can even spend an hour to reinforce a portion of a structure. This is a really cool feat, and I enjoy it. Basically, being able to upgrade the damage your shield reduces by 1, 2, or 3 every day, that's awesome! This just straight upgrades your shield every day, and it's fantastic. Sheltering Slab is pretty simple. As long as you are next to a vertical stone wall within one space, so adjacent to your square, you cannot become flat-footed from being flanked. You can still become flat-footed if you're knocked prone or inflicted with something that specifically makes you flat-footed, but as long as you're next to a wall, even against the corner, it counts. You can't be flanked. You can still have people on either side of you, but you're not flat-footed against them. Just a solid defensive feat choice. Mountain's Stoutness is explained so poorly they actually fixed it in the errata. So, first off, this is basically the toughness feat, almost verbatim. You increase your maximum hit points by your level, so this would probably be taken at level 9, so 9 extra hit points, and rather than saying, decrease the DC of recovery checks when you have the dying condition, they changed it to, the DC of your recovery checks is equal to 9 plus your dying value. Which makes a lot more sense, because when you're dying, each stack of dying increases the DC of your recovery check, so this is just explained way better. Additionally, with this feat, if you also have toughness, the hit points do stack. So if you take this at level 9 and you have the toughness general feat, you gain 9 hit points from both of them, which is massive. And the DC of your recovery checks is improved all the way to 6 plus your dying value. So stacking the two of these is so powerful that you get a 75% success chance when you're dying 1. Really cool, just really stout as a mountain. Stonewalker is amazing and actually leads into a better feat later on. You gain the Meld into Stone 3rd level Divine Innate spell once per day. Now what's fascinating about this, and this applies to the future one as well, Meld into Stone is only an arcane and primal spell. It's not even on the divine spell list, so it's fascinating that they gain this as a divine innate spell. I'm guessing it's something to do with the dwarven lore and their love of stones being involved in their religion, and I really love that. Basically, Meld into Stone allows you to literally sink into solid stone and hide there out of sight. You can hear, but you cannot see, and you can actually cast spells from inside the stone so long as you don't need to be able to see to cast them. On top of that, when you take this feat, you can use your Stone Cunning Dwarf Ancestry feat to locate traps and such that would require legendary proficiency, even though you're only level 9, and in addition, you don't take the -2 penalty if you're not actively seeking anymore, so you just get to roll a flat check. The GM rolls a flat check for you, even if you don't state that you're seeking for stone-laden traps. Good stuff. Echoes in Stone is just really awesome. You spend an action and you must be standing on stone or earth, and you basically just gain 20-foot tremor sense. That's it. It's just really cool. You are so in tune with the stone that you can tell where people are within 20 feet of you. Just really cool. Returning Throw is great, unnecessary, and awesome. Basically, if you make a 2-action attack with a thrown weapon, it functions as though it has returning. It doesn't even need to have the returning rune on it. You just have to spend an additional action throwing it, and it'll always come back to you. Fantastic. And Stone Bones is a really cool reaction. If you are ever critically hit, you can make a flat DC 17 check, and if you succeed, it is just a normal hit. So on top of an enemy critically hitting you, you get a 20% chance to make that crit a normal strike, which is just really cool. I love the ability to say, no, you don't critically hit me. Like, how often can you say that? Dwarven weapon expertise, again, is going to pop up for most ancestries. Effectively now, with any of the dwarven weapons you were trained with your original feat, if your proficiency goes up in any kind of weapon, these ones go up as well. Even if you only get to master with simple weapons, you can still get to master with these weapons so long as you took this feat. Telluric power is cool and unfortunate. You will never want to take this and Vengeful Hatred at the first level together, because they are both circumstance bonuses with the same effect. They both add bonus damage equal to your number of weapon damage dice to your attacks, and because they're both circumstance bonuses, they do not stack. And Telluric power, obviously being a level 13 feat, is way better, because you gain this bonus damage if you're ever fighting on stone or earth. Which, again, is gonna be like 90% of the time, unless you're fighting on like a nice wood floor. Because even if you're fighting on like marble, I would still count marble as a stone, you know? It's still hewn, it's still mined. So this basically just gives you a permanent circumstance bonus to damage rolls as a dwarf, which is really, really good, and unfortunately makes bonuses from things like the duelist and martial archetypes kind of moot. And what I love, I didn't even realize we were missing this, but in the Advanced Player's Guide, they added 17th level Ancestry feats. I've never played a campaign up to 17th level, so I didn't even know that most, if not all, ancestries in the core rulebook stopped at 13th level. You still gain an Ancestry feat at 17th level, but you would have just had to take a lower level one. Now in the APG, we actually have official 17th level Ancestry feats. So we are looking at Stonegate, which is the upgrade to Stone Walker, which was the one that allowed you to meld into stone. Instead, you can now cast Passwall as a 7th level divine spell once per day. However, it can only be used on earth or stone. What Passwall does is it makes a 20-foot deep path through a wall. Normally, it's only 10 feet at 5th level, but because it's upcast at 7th level with this feat, it can be up to 20 feet deep. Additionally, anybody who walks past it doesn't see the tunnel. It all looks completely normal unless they have some way to disprove it and actually prove that it exists. And you can even set a password on it so people could come up to it and like knock 3 times on the wall next to it, and then the tunnel would appear for them. This is such a cool final feat for dwarves, and if you're really going into that like, I am a dwarf, I am one with the mountain, it is so cool to have this just ability to be like, mountain open before me, and then you step through. Such a cool final way to end off the Ancestry feats. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Dwarves in Pathfinder 2e. I did not expect this to go for over 35 minutes. Even in the video where I teased these, I expected, I can cover like 2 of Ancestries per video. No, we're sticking to 1. These are so much more deep, especially with the APG. I didn't realize how many feats the APG added. It's like at least 2 per level and a whole new level of feats. It's really, really cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you were playing a dwarf, if you plan to play a dwarf, why you love them, why you hate them. Be sure to drop a like and please subscribe to the channel if you're watching, because like I said in the gag at the beginning, only 43% of people are actually subscribed. So it would really mean a lot if you'd sub. We are on our way to that 3,000 mark. I think we're a little over 400 away. So it would be really cool if we could hit that by the end of the month. I know it's a really tough goal, 6 days, 400 subscribers, but I think we can do it. So thank you guys so much. If you're interested, there are links in the description to my Patreon, my Twitter, and most importantly, my Discord. In the Discord, we have so many people. It's been blowing up lately. We're up to 180 members in the Discord. I personally invite all of you to join in, come talk to some really cool people. We talk about Pathfinder, D&D, movies, comics, video games, whatever. We just have a really good time. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons for supporting what I do. You guys are incredible, and I cannot thank you enough. I'm really excited because tomorrow starts our patron campaign on Saturdays. Super excited to be able to play with the 4 $50 patrons. I'm really excited for that to start. So thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until next time, no nat ones.